So spontaneity. Spontaneity is a fascinating thing. We respond to something that's happening in our environment without thinking, so almost seemingly without thinking, and it could fit perfectly with what the moment calls for, right? In our personal lives, we may have had this. Professionally, we may have had this, almost without a conscious thought process. And it's a fascinating thing that we're able to do that, and it's something that I don't know if you guys have read any theory on it or neuroscience or anything like that, but they really don't have a good handle on what's actually happening there. Now, the theorists have been writing about this forever because it's a human phenomenon that even before they had the gold standard of research, people were still curious in humanity, and so there are some really interesting theories about how somebody gets to that point where they're spontaneously responding, and what that actually is. Because it could feel like magic. It could feel like something that I can't explain. It just happened, right? So I had a couple months ago, I had a moment in a tennis match where I did something that I had never done before. The ball got hit to me low while I was at the net on my backhand side, and I took a step and I stabbed at it, and it backspun diagonally across the net over to that corner. I'd never done anything like that. That bounce rhythm was something I'd never experienced before. My backhand at the time was my weaker side, and it was totally just a turn and a flick, and it was gorgeous. And I was like, where the heck did that come from, right? There's a spontaneity that exists, which we know, we've had it, but it's really, really hard to explain what actually is happening there. So let's talk about it a little bit. Y'all heard of Jacob Moreno? No? Anybody heard of Jacob Moreno? You heard of Jacob Moreno? Did you hear about Jacob Moreno from me or from someone? Not fair.
Yes, and that you may be reading.
Jacob Moreno. So Jacob Moreno, in the 20s, 30s, he's the inventor of the psychodrama. So you guys have used psychodrama before? Have you ever used psychodrama? You ever seen psychodrama done before? No? Even at Life Skills? No? Never? No? You never saw me do any psychodrama? No?
I don't really know what it is.
Okay,
That's
so
why I came.
Okay, so psychodrama, right? So Jacob Moreno at around the same time that Freud was really developing psychoanalysis, started to develop what he called was psychodrama from a totally different lens. He was more in what you would consider probably the humanistic view of people, the more existential, spiritual way of approaching people, and so he had this more of a healing approach to the world. There's a story, a legend, which I don't know if it happened, and B, if I'm saying it over correctly, but legend has it that he met Freud at one point, and he said to Freud something like, what the difference between me and you is? You believe that people are problems, and I believe that people have problems, or something like that, right? So he was really Instagram before it was Instagram, right? So Jacob Moreno came up with this concept called the psychodrama group. In a psychodrama group, they would play out scenes of somebody's emotional experience as a way of expressing what's going on, as a way of exploring parts of themselves that they maybe had never explored before. And it was all under the philosophy that the power of the group is more powerful than an individual, right? So we know that from group therapy theory that there's the concept of the group as a whole and mutual aid and all those kind of concepts. So, but he took it even a step further. Well, you could say a step further, but he was pre a lot of that theory, where he said that if we create a theater the same way that a theater exists, but we do it for the emotional purpose and the therapeutic purpose, it could potentially be really helpful. So this is what he came up with. The patient is the subject of the drama, right? And then there are these other roles. The director, that's the therapist, right? The audience is the other group members. Auxiliary egos are whoever joins with that, subject, right? And then, I don't believe it says it on here, but the fifth piece of it is the stage. I'm supposed to say that. So 5 parts to a psychodrama. And so you'd have somebody say, let's say I'm really anxious about this conversation I have to have with my spouse. So now one of the other group members plays the spouse, and the other group members are the audience, and then the therapist is the director directing the scene, right? All of those parts together actually help each other. So it's not just the benefit of the subject it's not just the subject that benefits. It's actually being somebody from the playing the spouse allowed me to think about something that is going on in my life, right? Seeing the scene as an audience member, seeing it from unfold entirely in front of my eyes, outside of myself, was really interesting, right? The director maybe giving notes and pushing in this direction or that direction is really helpful, and having the stage be like formalized in a way, which doesn't say here, but he does write about that. It makes it that there's this place to explore, this place to play, right? So this is what he would use. This is what he writes. The purpose of the activity is to create an arena where the patient can explore fears, hopes, regrets, failures, fantasies, and internal conflicts, which is hard for us to do. It's hard for us to do internally. It's also hard for us to do cognitively and verbally, right? So when we say out loud, I'm afraid of blah, 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 we all know this, that somebody could be very emotionally detached from that statement, right? If you've ever worked in a clinic where you had a formalized psychosocial, when you ask the question about abuse and the person says, yes, I was abused from age 5 to 11, right? You're like, okay, that's interesting information, but we're not processing emotion right now. We know that. There's no processing that happened. And so there's a space that gets created for the individual when they're able to do it in this playful stage setting with help from other people, help from the audience, where they can go to a lot of places that they haven't gone to before. Now, in psychodrama, psychodrama is really powerful. I've had psychodramas, I want to say, go south, but not really, because then it was more opportunity for us to process things. But I've had people fully triggered from a psychodrama because they just re-experienced a conversation with somebody who was really horrible to them and they couldn't regulate their emotions. Now, then it was an opportunity for us to help regulate the emotions, but it gets that real, right? We know that we can play and we can imagine to the point where it feels real. That's what movies are. We know that they're not actually happening, but we get emotionally invested in it to the point where we can feel, don't go in that door, or I can't believe that she got her heart broken like that, right? We feel invested in the characters, even though intellectually we know that it's false, right? Reminds me of a Beverly Hillbillies episode where they go on a plane for the first time and they show a movie, and it was a cowboy movie, and they're like chasing cowboys, and all the family think that that's happening out the front window of the plane, so they're like yelling, like, get him, kill him, shoot him, right? They have no idea that it's a movie. So we get emotionally invested in things, and once we're emotionally invested in something, it can feel super real, which then gives us an opportunity to process something potentially without the actual threat of that thing being there, right? So psychodrama, and this is legend has it, I haven't confirmed this either, but you guys have heard of Gestalt therapy, yes? Right? So in Gestalt therapy, all the empty chair work, legend has it that Fritz Perls traveled from New York to California, met with Jacob Moreno, spent like a couple days with him, went back to New York, and just basically stole his stuff. And he was like, guys, this is what I've invented.
It's interesting because when I didn't know what psychodrama really is. On my way here, and I was telling my family, like, I don't know, it's kind of Gestalt workshop.
Yeah, right. So that's legend has it that's what happened. I don't know that that's what happened, but you definitely can see the chain, right? Because Gestalt really becoming big in the 60s and 70s. You can see that psychodrama was the predecessor to the Gestalt work. The what we would say nowadays is followed Gestalt work is a lot of the IFS work that people do, right? Working with parts. Now, if we're working with parts, are we doing that very experientially, or are we just using the concepts? Both of them are fine. They're both good. But there are ways that we can do it more experientially, which is more playful, right? And is uncomfortable for us and uncomfortable for our clients some of the time, but also can bring out more powerful emotion, right? So I've had many clients tell me, I haven't cried in 20 years. And even at my blah, blah, blah's funeral, I didn't cry, right? And I'm like, all right, let's do some Gestalt work, and we'll see if we can break that streak. And it takes about 40 minutes. Meaning that if there's something meaningful there and they're really feeling it, it's hard to deny an experience, right? So we have to, in order to do that, we have to bring the person into that experience. We also have to buy into the concept of this imaginative world being valuable, right? We can't be like, look, there's a thing that, I don't know, like some therapists do it, where you like sit in a chair and like kind of talk to another part of yourself, right? It doesn't. You have to really be invested in it, and you have to really believe that you're talking to their dead grandfather, or you're looking at the younger version of themselves, right? So I had this experience with my professor back a few years ago, where he was a Gestalt therapist, and he did Gestalt supervision on us in class. And I had a client who was intimidating me, and I always felt very nervous around this client. And he got me to feel that intimidated feeling, talk to that client, experience it, and then he helped me find another part of myself that was stronger than that intimidating feeling. And then he moved me into that part. And as soon as he moved me into that part, I broke down crying in front of the whole class. And I'm not a crier. Like, I'll cry, but I'm not like an easy crier. Like, it was surprising to me. After that, about a year later, I was talking to him, and I had a different client that I was stuck on, and he was like, you want to do some work? And I was like, let's do it. So he came here, and we sat on pillows in my office, and I had my 12-year-old self in that session with him. And it was intense. It was really intense. It ended with him telling my 12-year-old self, you know what a lot of kids need in therapy, so you want to stick around and help Juda, who's, he's a big therapist now, and he's, an adult, but you kind of know more than him in a way. Do you want to stick around here, and like whenever he needs your help, you can ask him, and he can ask you? And my 12-year-old self was like, yeah, I'll do that. And for a long time, I would look over at that pillow, which represented my 12-year-old self when I needed guidance, and I literally asked it in my head sometimes, Juda, what should I do here? Like, what would you say, Juda? Right? And like I listened, and it's because it was so real to me, right? And so you have to buy in. You have to buy in as a person, and you also have to buy in as a therapist, or that it's therapeutically, going to work. So meaning buying in as a person is that this type of imaginative world is very useful. Buying in as a therapist is that, right, that this intervention is potentially going to be very useful to you as well. Right, so Jacob Moreno, we can skip this one, but he wrote a lot about the theater of the spontaneity was a book that he wrote. So this is an interesting debate which a lot of people have, but especially in the improv world, is how much structure is too much structure, right? So if I want to be free and I want to just be playful, so don't give me rules. And at the same time, if I don't have any rules, it's hard, right? So this is Moreno's writings. Too much structure, too many tight rules, and a sense of significant, fearful consequences. Should those rules be broken, inhibit spontaneity, right? So that was our example before, where we said, here's a bunch of random things, make something from it. And you're like, I don't know what you want from me. And that makes sense, because it's like, well, what are the rules, right? Now, if I said it has to look like the Mona Lisa, like, how the hell am I going to do that, right? So too little structure and too much ambiguity raises anxiety. So there's a window, just a bit of structure that creates an optimal circumstance, right? The optimal circumstance is where our anxiety is not blocking our creativity, but we're not getting anxiety from the wide openness of it, right? And this is where he would say this leads to the spontaneity. Any questions or thoughts or ideas?
Is this
What?
teaching
Yes.
children
Yes.
Judaism?
Life.
Yes.
Yeah. It's obviously it's a hard balance, because when you're maintaining rules, like when somebody breaks a rule, like, how do you know, right? So we were playing a game once, just like a word association game with animals, right? And it was like going through, I don't know, giraffe and bear, and someone said tiger, and then somebody said golf, right? So it was like we were supposed to be doing animals, but tiger made you think of Tiger Woods, so like I guess it's cool. Like, meaning at that point do we say, I appreciate what you're doing there, but we were doing animals, right? Like, or do you kind of be like, yeah, the rules are kind of loosey goosey, right? So it's hard to balance that.
Probably there's also different personalities that need different, extent of like more fluid rules versus like more structured rules.
Yeah, that's that's definitely true. I had a lot of feedback from my students when I was teaching that, not a lot, there would always be a few that felt like they didn't know where I was going with what I was teaching because I didn't do the boring professor thing. Today we're going to cover this, and this. I wanted it to unfold in more of a storytelling performance kind of way, and it would make a lot of them anxious, and the other ones would be like so riveted because I would start with a picture of just a door, and I'd be like, what do you guys think of this door? And they'd be like, I don't know, where's it going? It's like I would have like
Right.
split in half, right? So I've gotten the
Like I'm sure some kids in a classroom like love like the schedule and they come in and
Right.
they put their bag somewhere and they have their circle time. And, you know that they know when they're eating lunch.
right.
And then like some kids might need like more of a open-ended, like
Montessori.
right, like where that I do whatever I want in this time. Like I can choose when I want to do my
Yeah,
lunch.
and I think that it's a mix of a lot of things because like there's also structure for unstructured time. Like for me as a kid, anytime that I had enough of a structure where I was allowed to go bananas, I thrived. Meaning that it wasn't just wide open, just go bananas. Then I would go too far, right? And then they would say, Juda, you've taken it too far, which I heard once or twice in my life. And so, but when it would be like it'd be camp, and I'd be at camp and we'd be putting on a play, right? And I would be doing a character. Be like, all right, so there's a structure here where you can go crazy in that structure. Go for it, right? That was what I needed. And at the same time, like in certain academic spaces, I really needed more structure. I needed to be like really structured, right? I think my son's like that. My son thrives on the structure because his Rebbe is very structured. And he thrives in there. And at the same time, like he needs to just go in the back and be like, I took 400 pictures of a lizard that I found. Because he's just like looking for stuff and like finding stuff and like unstructured space. So, right? So it's a tough balance. It's really a tough balance. Now, anxiety tries to structure everything, right? And that's where it completely limits creativity and spontaneity, right? Oh, I didn't put it in? All right.
Have you had any group members or patients be the director and you be the actor and stuff?
So I act in all of the stuff, all the scenes that we do, I do it with them. Partially because it's fun for me, but also because I'm not going to push them into something that's uncomfortable without showing them that like I'm willing to do this too. Now that wouldn't be true in other clinical situations where it's like I want you to talk about your trauma, and in order for you to make you comfortable, I'm going to talk about my trauma. Because then it becomes all about me, and then it becomes a burden for them, right? But if I'm going to tell them we're making animal noises, I'll be like, all right, let me start. I'll do that because I want them to see that I see the value in this too, and that I'm willing to do it with you too. And when I'm uncomfortable, I share with them that I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, ooh, that one got me, guys. I don't know why. Whew, that was rough. So I do it with them. I do scenes with them all the time, and I get stuck with them all the time.
No, but as an intervention that they direct, that they say, like maybe let their anxiety kind of be expanded, and you act it out or someone else acts it out, and they're like, no, but what if this happened in the scene, and you let them kind of direct it.
Okay, so that's what you're saying. So one of the things that's just very important for psychodrama in general is checking with the subject if that's accurate to the experience, right? So a lot of times, this is not from the improv, this is more like straight psychodrama stuff, we'll do with anxiety where it's like, all right, you are here and then Jack, you're gonna play Tim's anxiety, right? Now, when Jack is Tim's anxiety, I will check in with Tim. Is that accurate? And sometimes they'll say, no, that's not how my anxiety sounds. My anxiety actually swears more. My anxiety actually doesn't talk that quickly, right? My anxiety is actually kind of like a low hum, right? So all the things that they're directing their scene partner with, all those notes, is them getting to know their anxiety better, right? It's very subtle. Like it's more for the purposes of the scene. It feels like it's for the purposes of the scene. Really what they're saying is, I'm going to describe my anxiety in such exact detail, right? Probably like they've never done before. And they for sure have never done that in their head, because that's very hard to do in your head. Like to give your anxiety a voice and a persona and tone of voice, right? All that kind of stuff. So I'll always check with them. So let's say it's somebody who's from a part of their life, like Jack's gonna play your mom. All right, so tell us about your mom. So that's what we do. So set that up. Tell us about your mom, and then we'll check in with Jack. Jack, what did you hear about Tim's mom? Right? What are the main points? What's Tim's mom like? Right? And then he'll say that, and then I'll go back to Tim and be like, Tim, is that accurate? And then Tim might be like, yes, but she also does this thing where and then we're getting more important detail. She does this thing where she leaves off a sentence halfway through because she's trying to guilt you into saying something that that she wants you to say. And you're like, all right, Jack, can you do that? Right? And then he'll try that out. Sometimes it's fun and funny, which is also really interesting because then it's like we're approaching this really tough area with like a defense with us, which is awesome. Bring the defense with you into that scene. We can make fun of how much of a cartoon character your mom is, right? Maybe take away some of the power that she's levied on. Right? Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I could see I was validating. So, but at the same time, I'm also curious if it works with people with personality disorders, because then you could be here all day, but then saying like, no, that's not how it was.
Right.
No, it wasn't like that. No,
Right. Okay. So this is where the improv stuff comes in. Right. So in the psychodrama, so it's clearly therapeutic, right? And there's an intention to it, and we want directing by some of the scene partners, and there is like, no, that's not how it goes, right? In improv, that's not going to be helpful, especially to a beginner. I'm going to explain that in a minute. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to be an improv teacher. Nothing to do with therapy, right? Because this is what happened to me in a good way, is that I've always been interested in psychodrama, but training in it and understanding it is very limited. It's hard. It's just not like a very utilized.
Diploma.
That's why I want the diploma, right? So the badge. I'm gonna get a badge. I'll wear it everywhere. But really, everything that I learned about psychodrama was from my own reading and like watching videos of people that put up psychodrama sessions. It was really hard to train in it. Not that you can't train in it. There are institutes and stuff, but it's not like the norm. It's not on like the EMDR, DBT kind of track of things, right? And so when I decided I was going to go kind of like through the improv world to get there, what I found was the improv world and the larger theater world is better at getting people to do stuff without explaining it, right? So we like to explain things to people, right? Because that's up here and that's professional protection that we have, right? In the theater world, they'll tell you to do something and then you just do it. And then you have the experience of doing it. So for example, this was one of the weirdest days in one of my classes. I don't know what technique this is from, and even me saying that is my therapist self trying to analyze it and put it in a box and buy the book and then highlight it and whatever. But the class started out with our teacher telling us to like move into all these like become these inanimate objects, and then things would happen to the inanimate object. So like, you are an egg, literally, and I'm standing there on a chair like this, and she's like, now the egg cracked, and then I'm starting to like drip, right? And she's like, now it's really hot, and the egg is frying, and like we were doing this for like 5 minutes, and at a certain point we were in clouds, and we were supposed to be like metaphysical particles or something. I don't even know what that was, but I was doing it, right? All that stuff was me going with it because I was like, this is a theater class. If it was a therapy session, I'd be like, what is the exact intervention here, right? Or as a patient, very valid would be like, what's up? Like, what are we doing? Like, why are you telling me to be an egg, right? So the theater world has a way of getting people to do things, and the therapy world has a way of getting people to explaining things to people. Now, explaining things to people is great, but there's two problems with that. One is that it keeps you up here, right? The second thing is that we tend to miss the opportunities to let somebody learn for themselves through their own experience, right? So meaning that when I follow instructions in a theater class, the thing that makes it meaningful to me is the way that I feel. Like, my teacher will never say, do you see how now your cognitive processing is like, she won't say any of that. She'll just be like, all right, we're on to the next thing. And inside, whatever I feel is going to be is either valuable to me or not valuable to me, but if it is valuable to me, I hold on to it. right? So you create an experience for someone else, and the experience teaches that person more than the words that a therapist can say, right? So the theater world does a much better job at getting people to do things, and so if we can put them together, right, so then we might have something. And really, that's what Jacob Moreno was doing. Jacob Moreno had a strong theater background, and so he wasn't just a therapy guy. He had the theater background too. So when it comes to the ones like the personality disorder ones, are like, no, then we could be here for days, right? So when we do improv, the improv is there's a structure to the game, and you're going to go with it. And there's a way that we're going to teach you how to go with it, but you're going to go with it. Now, people will be uncomfortable, and people will say, I'm not good at this, and I don't want to do this. That's fine. That's all part of it. But if you're trying to manage this and direct this too much, you're going to end up actually not having a good time, and you're going to feel that you're not having a good time. So let's talk about it for a second. Let's talk about what that means. Improvisation. So these are just two. It's really one definition from the same people, two different parts of it. What is improvisation? A means of exploring in which we create conditions where imaginative group and personal experience is possible. That one's really technical. And then the second half of it, the spontaneous human response to an idea or ideas or a set of conditions. So essentially, you have something that's happening and you spontaneously respond to it, just what's happening in that microscopic moment. So for example, when somebody starts a scene, they'll start with an initiating line. And the initiating line will be something you've never heard of before, and the improviser most probably hasn't, the other scene partner probably hasn't heard before. So if I started a scene by saying, it seems like your puppy's going to be okay, we were able to remove the Lego from his ear. You had no idea what that scene was, even until the last word. Because when I said ear, that was a whole different thing that just happened. You were able to remove the Lego, okay, so maybe you swallowed it, right? So whatever your preconceived idea was of where the scene should go, it's slowly getting narrowed down, right? And so it gets narrowed down, and then it's handed over to you. And there's this tiny little moment where you're supposed to respond, right? How are you supposed to respond? I don't know who anybody is. I don't know what anything is here, right? So this is where that spontaneity and that creativity comes in, where if we had anxiety that's really strong, it would block us, right? But if the anxiety wasn't there, could we make something up in that moment, and could it fit perfectly? Potentially it could. All right, so that's what improvisation is. Now, I'm going to come back to Spolin in a moment. She's like my new Rebbitzin. I'm going to do it like this. All right, so if you had to explain to somebody how you ride a bike, would you be able to do it? Why it works? I wouldn't. We don't really know why it works. You might be able to teach somebody else how to ride a bike, but how do we do all that stuff at one time? We really wouldn't be able to explain it to another person unless we studied it and broke it down and maybe reverse engineered it, right? So in the 50s, the theater world was very heavily influenced by European theater, and in America, very heavily influenced by European theater and high class fantasy, right? Where it was these people who were living lavish lives and drinking tea and that kind of. That was what Broadway was. That was a lot of the theater was, right? So then you have these schmucks who come along, and they're like, what if we make up scenes without having any plan, right? And without having any props, and without having any costumes, right? So Viola Spolin, who was on the slide before this, she was doing improvisation in the 30s, and then her son, Paul Sills, in the 50s, was like, I'm going to make this a real form of theater, right? And so as they were doing this, they were starting to see that people were interested in this show that they were doing. They thought, let's try to figure out why is this working. So they reverse engineered it, and so they would put on a show and they'd work on their material and they would test stuff out, and then Elaine May and Theodore Flicker would meet every single morning for breakfast and try to figure out why this works. And this is what they came up with. So these are called the kitchen rules. Okay? So this is what they came up with. If two people start a scene, one person cannot deny the other person's reality. So this was from an incident that they had on stage where this guy Severn came on and he said, I have a bunny in my hand, and then the other person said, no, that's not a bunny. And they got a laugh from the audience, but the scene fell apart, right? So don't deny. If Severn says he has a bunny in his hand, he has a bunny in his hand, okay? Number 2, make a strong choice. We'll leave that one aside for now. Now, this one, all the therapists, all of us should be very excited about this one. This is what they figured out. You are you. What you think of as your character is really just a part of you. Like, how cool is that? So these are just theater people sitting in a kitchen who are trying to figure out, like we did something magical feeling, kind of, in a way, and let's try to figure out what it is. And this is one of the things they came up with. You are you, so what you think of as a character is really just a magnified piece of you. What that means is that this is you being creative. This is you free of your anxiety. And what comes out might sound like a different person, but you actually wouldn't get that different person out of you if you weren't you. So like it's a real expression of who you are, right? And that's why I think a lot of the guys couldn't wrap their head around Marvin, because they were like, that's not you, that's not normal, that doesn't seem healthy. I was like, no, actually this is more me than a lot of other things I do in my life, because when I'm doing this, it means I'm free of my anxiety and I'm expressing myself. Now, it sounds like a different guy, but really it is myself. So they reverse engineered it. This is what they came up with. And what now is referred to today as yes and. And this is from a group earlier in the week. All right, so yes and. Yes and is the foundation of all improvisation. When you start a scene and I say I have a bunny rabbit in my hand, you say yes. And then you add something. So then you say and. When you say and, I say yes to that and then I say and. And what we have after, sometimes, if it's a good one, after 3 lines, we might have an entire world that we could freeze it at that moment and say to the audience, all right, who are these people? What are they doing? Why are they here? And we might have the entire thing. And what are the objects that are in the room, right? And so yes and is a well-known principle in the world of improvisation, and it's also not something that's used in society very often, because people don't want to give up power and they don't want to agree with other people because it's scary. So when someone has an idea, a lot of times the response is, I don't know if that's going to work, right? Or like, that's not going to work because, like that beginning of that statement. I've heard that 1 trillion times in my life. I'm sure you guys have heard that too, right? It's so easy to shoot something down, and it feels safer to shoot something down. So when I teach people about yes and, sometimes I get like active resistance to the yes and, where they're like, I don't think it's gonna work. I'm like, you realize like you're saying no, but like while I'm teaching you yes and, like, but it's not gonna be funny. I'm like, but we didn't even do it yet, right? So this is scary for a lot of people. I ran a class recently, and one guy was so resistant to yes and that he started arguing with me, like in the class, to try to make his point that like we should be able to be like more like no and more like negative. He thought I was just being like overly fluffy and positive, and I'm like, no, this is a principle which is really actually a very valuable thing. When there's no real stakes to saying yes and, if a stranger comes over to you and says, can I hold your wallet for a minute? You don't say yes and, right? But if your husband comes over to you and says, I was thinking like maybe we get some cake for Shabbos, right? So instead of being like, I don't know, like, what do we lose? What do we lose by saying yes and? There are situations where we lose nothing, but we feel like we're protecting something because we're going to lose it if we say it. Okay, can you do a yes and with me?
Mm-hmm.
And wake you up a little bit?
Yes.
All right.